Beneath the golden quiet of the Appalachian woods, a war veteran named Evan sought nothing but peace, hoping the whisper of wind through the pines might silence the echoes of war still haunting his mind. But when his loyal German shepherd, Scout, began digging frantically near a rusted watchtower long forgotten by time, the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. A strange chemical stench rose from the ground, sharp, unnatural, and laced with decay, turning the air heavy with dread. As Evan stepped closer, curiosity wrestled with the instinct that told him to run. What he uncovered that day would the morning stretched open like a hymn, sunlight bleeding through pine branches and touching the porch of Jack Merrin's cabin in soft gold. He stood there with a mug of coffee warming his hands, his grey t-shirt and open navy grey beige plaid flannel catching the light, jeans faded from years of wear, eyes calm but distant. Ranger, his silver-grey German shepherd with the white chest patch, sat beside him, gaze fixed on the mist that rolled through the valley. It had been months since Jack left behind the noise of war and chose the mountains for peace. Yet peace, he was learning, had edges. That morning, while fixing a loose floorboard, he found a small tin box buried beneath the wood. Inside it, an old map, creased, yellowed, the ink faded except for 3 hand-drawn crosses. One was darker than the rest, drawn in fresher blue ink. He studied the handwriting, steady, careful, not random. Ranger sniffed the paper, then looked toward the eastern ridge as if he understood. Jack smiled faintly. "You think so too, huh?" By noon, they were walking the ridge path, the forest alive with wind and bird call. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became, until sound itself seemed to hold its breath. And then, through the trees, the tower appeared, an old steel structure rusted red and strangled by vines, too tall, too unnatural to belong. Ranger froze, muscles tight, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Jack knelt, brushed aside wet leaves, and found a badge buried in the mud. The letters on the back read MC. He turned it over in his hand, feeling its weight, the way old metal carries memory. The forest watched in silence. Somewhere beneath that stillness, a truth waited, patient as the dead. The next morning, the fog lay thick and low, clinging to the earth like breath. Jack followed the old trail down the slope, the map folded in his flannel pocket, his boots leaving quiet impressions in the damp soil. Ranger walked beside him, head low, tail steady. They reached an old stone fence, half swallowed by vines, and the air shifted, dense, aware. Then from the trees stepped a man who looked like he'd been carved out of the same wood he stood among. Lean, weathered, eyes as sharp as nails. His clothes were work-worn, his hands resting on the stock of a Winchester rifle that had seen as many winters as he had. "You're on my land," the man said, voice rough, neither angry nor friendly. Jack lifted a hand, calm. "Didn't see a sign." The old man smirked, though it never reached his eyes. "Don't need one. I'm Harris. This ridge has enough ghosts without strangers digging around." The wind stirred, brushing dry leaves across their boots. Ranger's fur rose slightly, but he stayed silent, reading the tension like a soldier. "Just walking," Jack replied. "Then walk somewhere else." Harris lowered the rifle a fraction, not in trust, but in warning. "Some things out here ain't meant to be found, son." Then he turned and disappeared into the trees as if the forest had swallowed him whole. Jack stood still, the man's words lingering in the air like the echo of something old. He looked down at Ranger, who stared after Harris, ears still forward. The tower stood behind them, hidden now by mist, but Jack could feel it watching, waiting. He touched the map in his pocket, and though he didn't say it out loud, both he and the dog knew he'd be going back. Harmony Creek lay quiet beneath the midday sun, its red brick storefronts dozing under the hum of cicadas. Jack parked his truck outside the sheriff's office, the badge glinting faintly on the dashboard. Ranger jumped down first, paws landing soft on the hot pavement, eyes scanning the empty street with soldier's caution. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and dust, years of stillness disguised as peace. 2 deputies looked up from their desks, their laughter dying in the air. Jack nodded politely, placed the badge on the counter, its metal surface dulled but accusing. "Found this near the ridge," he said. The older of the two cleared his throat. "Sheriff Boone'll want to see that." A moment later, Boone emerged from his office, a broad-shouldered man with a tired face and sharp eyes. He picked up the badge, turning it over in his calloused hand. "Old mining relic, most likely," he said, but the weight in his tone betrayed him. "Where exactly did you find it?" "By the old tower," Jack replied. Boone's brow twitched, barely. "Best stay clear of that area. Unstable ground, lots of old shafts." His words were even, but his gaze was the kind that had learned to hide things. The phone rang. Boone answered, listened in silence, then hung up. "Appreciate you bringing this in," he said finally. "Now you enjoy your day." Jack pocketed the badge again. Ranger's ears flicked. He sensed the tension before his master did. Outside, the sunlight struck hard, flattening the world into heat and glare. Jack stood by his truck, eyes narrowed toward the hills. Behind him, through the office window, Boone watched for a moment before pulling the blinds closed. The message was clear. Stop digging. But Jack had never been good at leaving ghosts alone. The rain began as a whisper, a single drop that darkened the dirt road. By the time Jack reached the ridge, the sky had turned to slate. Thunder rolled low and distant, carrying across the valley like an old warning. He climbed on foot, Ranger close at his heel, both moving in rhythm, quiet, sure, like men who'd learned to read danger before it spoke. When the tower came into view, it rose out of the mist like something abandoned by time. The ground beneath it had been scrubbed clean. Too clean. The leaves rearranged, the soil freshly packed. Someone had been here. Jack knelt, running his fingers over the earth. It was soft, damp, recently disturbed. "They came back," he murmured. The sky cracked open. Rain fell hard, cold, relentless. They took shelter under a rock overhang, the world beyond blurring into motion. Ranger's fur darkened, water streaming from his coat as he stared toward the tower. A flash of lightning lit the field, and something caught Jack's eye. A glint near the base of the structure, half buried in mud. He ran toward it, hands sinking into the earth, pulling free a small brass tag, the metal green with corrosion. Stamped letters read, "Black Ridge Coal, 047. He turned it over in his palm, heart steady but heavy. The tower wasn't random. It was a grave marker. He looked to Ranger, who gave a single low bark, tail stiff. The rain poured harder, blurring the world into silver, but Jack's mind had gone still. He slid the tag into his pocket, wiped the rain from his face, and looked toward the valley below. Somewhere down there was a truth the town had buried, and a man who didn't want it unearthed. The storm, at least, was honest. Morning broke clean and cold after the storm. Mist hung low, the forest dripping with silence. Jack crouched beside a fallen log, rubbing a smear of reddish clay between his fingers. Ranger sniffed the ground, tail straight, every muscle alert. The color didn't belong here. This was mine clay, pulled from deep below the surface. Someone had been moving through the forest, and not long ago. "Track it," Jack said softly. Ranger darted ahead, weaving through undergrowth, nose low, tracing the faint trail of red streaks. Jack followed, boots pressing into damp earth, his mind turning with each clue. The deeper they went, the older the forest grew, branches tangled like ribs over a buried heart. Then, through the mist, the land fell open into a clearing. Rusted rails cut through tall grass, and an old mine head frame leaned crookedly over a black pit. The sign beside it read, "Black Ridge Coal Co." Half the letters had rotted away. The air that rose from the opening was cold and metallic. Wrong. Ranger growled softly, the sound carrying through the hollow space. Jack crouched near the entrance, his hand brushing over a fallen plank with faded writing. Coal. His chest tightened. He pulled the brass tag from his pocket, holding it beside the name. M.C. Michael Cole. the man whose story ended here. He looked into the pit, the dark swallowing even the morning light. "They said unstable ground," he murmured, voice low. "They didn't say bodies." The wind moved through the broken beams like breath. Ranger pressed closer, eyes fixed on the dark. Jack straightened, dust rising from his boots. The truth wasn't buried. It was sealed. The foreman's office crouched on the edge of the mine like a wounded thing, half its roof caved, walls twisted with vines. Jack pushed the door open. The hinges screamed, and dust swirled in the light like old souls unsettled. Ranger stepped inside first, sniffing the air thick with mold and iron. The floor sagged under Jack's weight. A broken desk leaned against the far wall, papers melted into pulp by years of rain. But beneath the rot, Ranger found something, his paw scratching at a loose board, a whine rising low in his throat. Jack knelt, pressed his palm to the spot. Hollow. He pulled his knife, pried it open, wood splintering. Beneath lay a small green metal box, rusted shut. He forced the latch, the sound echoing in the empty room. Inside, wrapped in a damp rag, were pieces of another man's life. Newspaper clippings about a mine collapse, a survey map marked with blue ink, and a black and white photograph of a miner holding a smiling little girl. On the back, faded handwriting read, "Michael Cole and Lily, 1988. Jack's breath caught. The badge, the tag, the silence from Sheriff Boone. It all aligned. He sat down hard, the floor creaking under him. Ranger pressed his head against Jack's knee, eyes soft and loyal. "We found him," Jack whispered. Sunlight spilled through the broken roof, touching the photo in his hand. In that stillness, surrounded by decay, the mountain felt alive again, like it had been waiting for someone to remember. He slid the photograph into his jacket, stood, and looked out toward the mine one last time. "They buried a man," he said quietly, "and a truth. We'll bring them both back to light." Ranger gave a single, steady bark, and the forest, for the first time, seemed to listen.